Thank you for downloading this book. As an independent author, I'm incredibly grateful for your support and hope you enjoy the journey ahead. If you enjoy this experience, please consider leaving a review to help other listeners find it. The Conscious Phase Shift Theory, Dismantling the Architecture of Human Suffering, written by Mark Giesbrecht, narrated by Andrew Smith. In this book, we will dismantle the architecture of human friction. We aren't here to discuss personality or feelings through the traditional lens of self-help. Instead, we are going to look at human behavior as a series of biomechanical signals and status management scripts, and understand how to deactivate the status alarms that leak your resources in order to develop the ability to reclaim cognitive power and see the ultimate truth. Author bio. Mark Giesbrecht is a behavioral analyst and business strategist specializing in deception detection and human condition mechanics. With a background spanning the pharmaceutical industry, technical infrastructure, business management, and marketing, he has spent over 20 years gathering the data that defines the conscious phase shift theory. Introduction: The View from the Ladder. Part 1. The Architecture of Noise. I have spent the better part of 2 decades standing on a ladder, looking into the private lives of strangers. My journey into the mechanics of human behavior didn't start in a psychology lab. It started in the field. I began my professional life in the pharmaceutical corporate industry. It was a world of rigid structures and high-stakes communication, where I was first exposed to individuals from every conceivable walk of life, navigating their most vulnerable moments. It was my first masterclass in how people present themselves when the official script is running. However, the observation deepened when my career took a more technical turn. I spent years running a low-voltage electrical company where I was installing television and internet services, a job that required me to be invited into the living rooms, kitchens, and basements of thousands of families. I have been inside the homes of the wealthy, the desperate, the religious, and the cynical. I have navigated the hushed tensions of a dissolving marriage in a suburban living room and the vibrant, chaotic energy of multi-generational immigrant households. Most people see a technician as a utility, a ghost in the room. But while I was connecting their cables, I was disconnecting my own biases. I began to ask a single, recurring question: what is the underlying motivation behind their actions? I closely observed how people spoke to their children when they thought I wasn't listening. I noticed the leak in a husband's expression when his wife mentioned a successful neighbor. I saw the physical clutter of homes that mirrored the mental clutter of the occupants. I wasn't just installing internet, I was gathering data on the human condition. Eventually, this curiosity moved from the ladder back into the boardroom. As I transitioned into general business management and marketing, the scale of the observation grew. I began to see that the same frictions I witnessed in a kitchen were being weaponized by the marketing industry. I realized that modern consumerism doesn't just fulfill needs, it intentionally triggers a biological resource leak, jealousy, to drive behavior. Throughout these years, whether I was in a corporate pharmaceutical office, a crawl space, or a marketing meeting, I noticed a high-noise environment. People are vibrating at a frequency of destructive interference, a constant grinding friction caused by 1,000,000 years of evolutionary programming that we no longer need. We are running primitive survival scripts on 21st century hardware. I realized that we don't need another ideology. We don't need more left versus right, or good versus evil. What we need is a conscious phase shift. A phase shift is the precise moment a thought becomes an action, or a wave changes its state. This book is the result of 15 years of trying to disprove a single deduction: that the rot we see in our society, our relationships, and our own minds stems from a single, identifiable biological glitch. If you are tired of the noise, if you are tired of the "I told you so" culture, and if you are ready to dismantle the architecture of your own suffering, then you are ready to look at the data. It is time to move from reaction to observation. Welcome to the Conscious Phase Shift Theory. Chapter 1. The Root of the Rot. To solve a problem, you must first identify the correct variable. In our attempt to understand human suffering, we have spent centuries looking at distorted and misunderstood variables. We study greed, but greed is merely a symptom of a perceived lack. We study hate, but hate is just the final defensive posture of a threatened ego. If you want to find the source of the high-frequency noise that disrupts our civilization, you have to look deeper into the soil of the human psyche. You have to look at the root of the rot: jealousy, the three-way glitch. Most people confuse jealousy with envy, but in a clinical sense, they are two entirely different biological scripts. Envy is a two-way interaction. I want what you have. It is simple, often quiet, and occasionally even a motivator for growth. Jealousy, however, is a three-way interaction. It requires a subject, a rival, and a resource. That resource might be a spouse's affection, a manager's praise, or a nation's prestige. Jealousy is the frantic, primitive fear of being replaced. It is the reaction to a perceived threat to our status within the tribe. In the ancestral environment, status was a survival resource. If you lost status, you lost access to food, protection, and mates. Your brain evolved a circuit breaker, an alarm system that fires whenever your position is challenged. The problem is that we are no longer living in the ancestral environment, but our hardware hasn't received the update, the biological hijack. When you feel the sting of jealousy, that sharp, cold contraction in your chest, you aren't experiencing a moral failure. You are experiencing a chemical hijack. The amygdala, your brain's radar for threats, fires a signal that overlaps almost exactly with the neural pathways for physical pain. To your brain, a friend's promotion or a peer's success isn't just annoying, it is a physical wound. It triggers the release of cortisol and adrenaline, preparing you to fight for your life in a situation where the only thing at stake is your ego. This is the glitch. In 2026, your brain thinks you are losing survival resources when you are actually just losing social standing. This primitive script running on modern hardware creates a constant state of high noise, the "I told you so" effect. This glitch leads to one of the most destructive behaviors in the human repertoire, the desire for the system to fail so we can be right about its flaws. Have you ever noticed a secret dark satisfaction when a perfect couple gets a divorce? Or when a highly successful company suffers a massive loss? This is the ego's way of clawing back status. If we can't be at the top, we want the top to be demolished. We see this on a global scale. Our obsession with apocalypse stories and the end of the world is often just the ultimate "I told you so." We would rather the world end than admit that someone else has found a better way to live within it. This is the ultimate zero-sum game. If I am not the hero of the story, I will make sure there is no story at all. Jealousy as a resource leak. If we accept that we live in a deterministic universe, one where things happen because of cause and effect, then jealousy is the friction in the gears. It is a massive resource leak. Imagine how much energy is spent every day on office politics, hidden sabotages, and domestic arguments, all fueled by the unconscious fear of being replaced. Imagine the scientific breakthroughs that were buried because a senior researcher was jealous of a junior assistant. Imagine the marketing campaigns designed specifically to make you feel less than, so you will buy a product to shift your status. When we are operating under the influence of the rot, we are not progressing. We are just grinding against each other, creating heat but no light. The singular source, the prime mover. In my 20 years of observation, I have tried to find an alternative. I have looked for a negative emotion that didn't have the sting of a status threat at its core. I analyzed anger, grief, spite, and even righteous indignation. But when you apply tactics like the L-square method, you strip away the social script the person is using to justify their pain, you find the same biological glitch every single time. Jealousy is the gravity of the human ego. It is the prime mover. Every other negative emotion is simply a secondary frequency, a shadow cast by the light of a perceived rival. If you haven't found the jealousy yet, you aren't looking hard enough. The deduction list, stripping the script. To understand the conscious phase shift, you must learn to boil down the signal. Here is how common emotional high-noise scenarios reveal their true origin. Example A, explosive anger. The scenario, you are having a disagreement with someone close to you. They calmly point out a valid flaw in your behavior or remind you of a promise you didn't keep. The surface emotion, a sudden white-out explosion of rage. You slam a door, yell a personal insult, or shut down the conversation entirely. The social script, I'm exploding because they are attacking me. They are being mean or unfair by bringing up the past. I'm just standing up for myself against their bullying. The root deduction, jealousy of moral superiority. By being calm and correct, they have effectively out-signaled you in the hierarchy of the relationship. You feel small, exposed, and lower than them. An explosion is rarely about the target. It is an emergency broadcast that your status alarm has just been triggered and you don't have the hardware to process the sting quietly. By naming it jealousy of the moral high ground, you take the power out of the anger. Yelling doesn't signal strength. It's simply the sound of a system overheating because you've lost the emotional calibration that the person across from you still maintains. Example B, the moral outrage, tyrants and power. The scenario, discussing or studying figures like Hitler or Stalin and feeling a visceral, explosive hate or a desire to erase their existence from history. The surface emotion, intense, righteous rage and moral disgust. The social script, the lie. I hate them because they are evil personified. My anger is a service to humanity and a protection of the victims. The root deduction, jealousy of absolute agency. Most humans spend their lives tightly calibrated to social rules, laws, and the needs of others. When you see a tyrant, you are seeing someone who is completely unplugged from the social contract. The mechanical reality. You are jealous of the power to be lawless. The sting comes from the fact that they exercised a level of main character control over the world that you have suppressed in yourself to be a good person. Your hate is an attempt to manually lower their status to subhuman to balance the scale of the immense power they held. Example C, deep sadness. The surface emotion, a heavy, lingering low or feeling of stagnation. The social script, I'm just sad because my friend got the promotion/house/partner and I'm still stuck here. The root deduction, jealousy of resource. Their success is a high-frequency data point that highlights my perceived failure. In a zero-sum mindset, their gain feels like my literal loss. Example, D, righteous, hate. The surface. Emotion, intense, moralized dislike of a public figure or group. The social script, I hate them because they are a bad person with dangerous or wrong values. The root deduction, jealousy of influence. I am jealous of the scale of their signal and their reach. By labeling them evil, I am attempting to delete their status to protect my own worldview. Example E, chronic anxiety. The surface emotion, persistent worry or system freeze. The social script, I'm just stressed about the economy, my job security, and the future. The root deduction, jealousy of future safety. I am comparing my current resources to those who have more, fearing I will drop in the hierarchy and lose my survival buffer. Example F, bitterness or spite. The surface emotion, petty resistance or refusal to help someone. The social script, I'm not doing them a favor because they didn't help me 3 years ago. It's a matter of principle. The root deduction, jealousy of debt. I am keeping a status ledger. I am jealous of the ease they are currently experiencing and want to manually inject friction into their life to level the field. The why behind the list. When you look at your life through this list, you realize that most of your emotional problems are actually status management issues. The brain is simply trying to rebalance the scales. The conscious phase shift occurs when you see the root deduction for what it is, a primitive survival alarm, and choose to ignore it in favor of utility. Section 2. The historical wreckage, pattern observation. If jealousy is the biological root, then history is the field of dead trees it has left behind. We often look at history as a series of political movements, economic shifts, or grand ideologies. But when you apply the lens of the conscious phase shift, you see that history is actually a record of coordinated sabotage. We can deduce the power of this emotion by looking at the moments where human progress was not just slowed, but intentionally set on fire. Example A, the scientific sabotage, Tesla versus Edison. One of the most clinical examples of the resource leak in action is the war of currents. We are taught that this was a competition between two technologies, direct current DC and alternating current AC. But the data shows it wasn't a race for the best technology. It was a race to protect a legacy. Thomas Edison was the established titan of power. When Nikola Tesla, a former employee, presented a vastly superior and more efficient system, AC, the status alarm in Edison's amygdala fired. Instead of adopting the better data for the benefit of humanity, Edison chose sabotage. The deduction. Edison didn't just want his system to win, he wanted Tesla to lose. He went so far as to publicly electrocute animals, using AC current to create a fear script in the public mind. The result, we delayed global electrical efficiency and sustainable innovation for decades. This wasn't about physics. It was about one man's biological inability to handle being wrong about the ultimate truth. Example B, the fall of the Library of Alexandria. Why do we burn books? Why do we destroy the records of civilizations we have already defeated? If the goal were purely resource-driven, land, gold, labor, the knowledge contained in a library would be the most valuable prize of all. The deduction. Conquest is rarely just about geography. It is about the jealousy of a culture's legacy. When one civilization deletes the records of another, they are attempting to format the drive. If a conquering force cannot claim to be the most ancient, the most wise, or the most chosen, the ego dictates that the rival's evidence must be erased. If I cannot be the hero of history, I will make sure your chapter is torn out. We burn the library not because the information is useless, but because the existence of that information makes our own status script feel obsolete. The I told you so on a global scale. Whether it is a scientist sabotaging a rival or a king burning a library, the logic remains constant. Jealousy is the mechanism we use to try and force the external world to fit our internal narrative. When we look at the wreckage of the past, we see a recurring pattern. Humanity would rather fail together than let a rival lead the way to success. This is the ultimate friction. Every time we choose the ego over the data, we trigger a negative phase shift, a collapse back into the noise. Section 3. The prestige synthesis. If we accept that we have been operating on this biological autopilot for millennia, the question becomes, how do we stop the fire? We must realize that whether it's a global war or a silent resentment in a corporate break room, the chemical trigger is the same. The king and the middle manager are both reacting to the same sting in the amygdala. If consciousness is the act of understanding the trigger, then seeing the jealousy is the only way to stop the sabotage. We have to move from being the reactors to being the observers.